Hey there, Kissable Misters. It's your boy B3, back with another kicking Kaiju TV show review. Yeah. Forever ago, a certain show came out, and the week it hit Netflix, I watched it and I made my notes, and then I didn't review it. So my dumb ass just found my notes, and I'm like, oh, I never reviewed Gamera Rebirth. So that's what we're doing today. The Reiwa Gamera anime series on Netflix. And I think it's some of the best Gamera content ever made. Really cool. It has this Pacific Rim-esque score. Like, the score really made me think of Pacific Rim, which was cool because, you know, it's a kaiju fighting show. And I also really liked all the framing in it. Like, the framing of the quote-unquote camera really makes the kaiju look big AF. You gotta love that. But when it comes to the visuals of it, there's like a clear difference between the human and kaiju animation. The kaiju animation seems smoother than the human animation. Like they put more time, work, and money into the kaiju, which I understand, but I would prefer if it was all equal. Like, towards the beginning, when Gamera saves him from a Gaus, it's like kind of clear because it really looks like Gamera is moving smoother than the boys. Well, they're mostly boys. They want you to think they are for most of the show anyway. Anyhow, the end credits in each episode are cool. But there's this one thing where the Japanese military is basically always on standby for the show, which I feel like is maybe a Shin Godzilla-esque committee thing, but it didn't really hit super well with me, but probably did better with Japanese audiences maybe. And now I really want to talk about Gaus. You gotta talk about Gaus, because Gaus is one of the kaiju that appears the most in the Showa series, and then the Heisei series firmly cemented Gaus as Gamera's arch foe. And when I say Heisei series, I mean all 4 films. And there's the Heisei trilogy, which is part of the Heisei series. You understand? Gamera the Brave is part of the Heisei series. People say it's the Millennium Gamera movie, but you don't have to give Gamera the same definers as Godzilla. You don't have to. It's okay. We don't have a Millennium Kamen Rider series. We just have Neo Heisei. It's fine. Not all these things have to have the same definitions, and it was still made in the Heisei era. So yes, I'm not going to create a whole new series name for one film. It's stupid. But Gaus looks really cool, but he has a very Heisei-esque look, and I saw in a behind-the-scenes featurette that they made Gaus look Heisei while making all the other kaiju look much more original with much heavier redesigns because they wanted it to feel like a transition away from the Heisei era, because Gaus is the first monster Gamera fights in this. When he defeats him, then you get to see the more intense redesigns after, transitioning away from Heisei and creating new expectations. That makes sense to me. I really like that. But then they bring Gaus back at the end, and part of it feels like it's pedaling backwards with that. Like, I thought you were putting Gaus aside, but the Gaus does have its own big Reiwa design. We'll probably talk about that more in a bit. But we do also have a great Gamera design. I like the blue lines and stuff in him, which is just a small touch of color, but it makes a lot of difference. And Gamera is a thick boy, too. He is a strong fella. And I like the look of Jiger. I think the pink is really interesting. He's actually the only Gamera Rebirth action figure I have so far. I was just like, I gotta get that Jiger. Jiger was the first Gamera movie I ever saw as a kid. So it also has a special place in my heart, and I'm glad that they gave Jiger the time of day, and an incredible fight scene, and an incredible death scene for Jiger. Really cool. They really respected every Showa kaiju in this. They really did. And not just the kaiju, they respect their human characters too. This is a character-driven narrative, you know? not a plot-driven narrative as most kaiju things are, and I think a character-driven narrative makes more sense for a TV show, you know? And these characters are really good. All 4 of these kids have a really interesting dynamic and really interesting relationships with each other. It's a really, really great show with magnificent characters that they really make you care about. It's a wonderful coming-of-age story with these young characters. And I think a lot of people will really, really like it. And I also like that Gamera needs their help to win sometimes. Sometimes Gamera needs human help to win. And that's good, because Gamera doesn't just show up and easily beat every kaiju. That would be boring. We know that there's eventually going to be a victory for the humans in the end season, unless it's a cliffhanger at the end of the season. So we know that Gamera's going to eventually win, but there needs to at least feel like there's stakes, you know? So that's good. My favorite new kaiju is probably Giron, who might be my favorite Showa Gamera kaiju. He's the one with the big knife head. And they gave him an incredible redesign, but the way he moves is so interesting. He almost rolls like a wheel, and he does all these big flips and stuff all over the place. Really cool, really insane. I loved that. And the Giron episode is the one where they say fuck. It's the F-word episode. Hooray! Didn't expect the kids to say fuck in this Gamera show, but welcome to the new age. To the new age. But this really does feel like it has the best elements of Showa Gamera and the best elements of Heisei Gamera all put together to make something beautiful and new, but also familiar. And then their like big bad kaiju at the end that they build up to is Virus, which is a bold choice because, in my mind, that is the most boring Showa Gamera kaiju. He's the worst Showa Gamera kaiju for sure in my mind. For sure. But they put a lot of respect on his name in this show. He's a big bad that you're like waiting to show up, and he does show up, and he's a big threat. But then they beat Virus, and there's a Gaus inside of it. And this is like a big monster-y Gaus. This is their new Gaus design that doesn't look as Heisei-ish. And it has these big frilled lizard frills on the side of its head, which is something Zetus had. So part of me is like, why make him look like Zetus, but not just use Zetus? And yeah, I know Zetus has like no bitches, but I am a card-carrying member of the Zetus fan club. I think Zetus is a really cool kaiju, and people straight up skipped on Gamera the Brave, and Gamera the Brave is a really underrated film, which I'm going to review at some point. It's quite good, guys, and Zetus is a cool kaiju. I think people just saw that Gamera the Brave was about children, and then they thought it was going to be very Showa-ish, and it really wasn't. It's a good film, guys. Check it out. But it also came out towards the end of the genre cycle for kaiju, which hurt it a lot too. But anyway, I'm digressing. So they do end up having Gaus as the final enemy, which does invoke Heisei. And even though they changed the design a lot from the Heisei one for this guy, it does kind of feel like a step back by going back to Gaus. I mean, you built up Virus as this big threat, and then you kill it, and then Gaus is there. That's probably my biggest complaint. Which is really saying something, because it's not that bad, all things considered. A lot of people were probably happier to see Gaus back anyway. But we also saw Evil Gamera, which didn't last long, but it did happen. And I feel like we all knew, watching this, that Gamera was going to perish. They bring him back from the brink of death just for him to fight immediately. And Gamera passes away. He dies. But it's okay, because there's a cute little baby Gamera, and he's so precious, and I love him. And he's super cute, and he leaves like a little cliffhanger. There's actually several cliffhangers in the credits and stuff, and the credits have a really good cover of that OG Showa Gamera song. But there's like one that's like a Steve Jobs thing. It's really weird. And I guess the big one is, other than Baby Gamera and Steve Jobs, is that Joe, who seems to heroically sacrifice himself in the show, somehow fucking lives. And that's a big deal cliffhanger. Especially since he exploded in space. So there must be more like alien ancient-y beings that have him or something. Or he's on another planet. It's got to be some kind of alien thing. Or alternate. I don't know. It kind of comes out of nowhere that Joe lives. Because while watching this show, they killed Joe, and then the last episode ended, and I was like, you know what? I respect that. I respect them for leaving a character dead after a heroic sacrifice. A lot of the time these days, heroic sacrifices in media either are meaningless, like in Kong Skull Island, or they just bring them back immediately, like in every comic book ever. But it felt like they were gonna leave Joe dead. It really, really felt like they were gonna leave him dead. And they didn't. And they revealed he was still alive. And I was disappointed and confused. I wasn't interested. I wasn't filled with suspense. I was just like, really? You're doing the same thing that every other show does? I mean, imagine the impact it could have had if you left him dead. Especially since it looks like this show is not getting a second season, despite the fact that they teased continuations in the plot and had a new Gamera be born. It's just, there was a lot of discourse around this show when it was announced. Kaiju Twitter and YouTubers and all were so excited about this show. And then it came out, and it was really good. Everyone I know who has watched it has said that it is really good. Even people who aren't into Gamera, who just watched it because Kaiju are big now, and they were like, whoa, that was really good. What great characters, blah, blah, blah. And then people just stopped talking about it. Everyone seemed so excited for the show, and then it came out, was good, and then people stopped talking about it. Gamera Rebirth deserves a season 2. It deserves it. With maybe original monsters. I would love that. I would love some original monsters in the Gamera franchise. We haven't really had one since Zetus. At least not in film and TV. Because I know there was that big fucking snake thing that Matt Frank did. Or whatever. But you could also show off some of the Gamera Kaiju that weren't in this. You could also bring back. You know? I don't particularly feel the need to see Legion again. But Barugan is very underrated. Because that film is pretty good. But it's like the film between the original Gamera and the real silly Gameras. So I think it gets overlooked a lot. Because it's just in a little weird spot. It's like the one film that doesn't have a child main character, if I remember correctly, either. Very interesting. But, and then also Zetus. Once again, I'm a huge Zetus stan. I am. I know, so many people don't care about Zetus. I do. I think he's awesome. He's a big dinosaur Australian frilled lizard. I mean, he's awesome. He eats people. He's brutal. Oh, I love Zetus. He's really cool, guys. And Iris could make a good end of season villain. Even though I feel like Iris is so perfect in Gamera 3 that it's almost not worth bringing them back because they're just so perfect in the film they're in. I would prefer new Kaiju in a season 2. I would prefer new Kaiju. But that's really it for Gamera Rebirth. It's an underrated show that does have things I didn't like about it. Like bringing Gaus back and bringing Joe back both kind of felt like cop-outs in a way. and I feel like the animation isn't totally consistent between the characters. The kaiju seem to have better animation than the humans. A lot of people told me they didn't see that. I don't know if it's just because I was looking for it for a review, but I don't know. I loved the show. At the end of the day, I loved the show. The good far outweighed what little bad there was. It's great. It's a great show. Really, truly. And I think it deserves that second season. They clearly set up for it. They clearly had plans for it. But it looks like we're not going to get it. But we should. Not only do we deserve it, well, maybe we don't deserve it because we're not giving Gamera Rebirth the credit it deserves, but Gamera deserves it. Gamera deserves it. So that is it. Thank you all very much for your support. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. Check out all the cool links in the description below, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And I can finally throw these old notes out. That's it. Thank you all once again. See y'all next time. Bye for now.